Be there.
Oop, is this better?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, perfect. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give a couple seconds for you guys to file in before we officially get started. Great. Good afternoon again, and thank you for joining today's Wednesday Wise webinar. My name is Sydney Konahia with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great 60 minutes signed up for you all today. Before we get started, I just want to touch on two things. The webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording along with the slide deck will be emailed out to everyone post-webinar. And if you have any questions for today's speakers, please feel free to drop them in the chat or questions box, and they will address them towards the end of the session. Today's topic is avoiding the emerging franchise pitfalls and is brought to us by Vendasta. Here to provide today's discussion are Nim Shapira, CEO of Fantastic Swim Academy, and Jeffrey Leach, Head of Sales at Vendasta. Thank you both for joining us, and thank you again to Vendasta for sponsoring today's Wednesday Wise webinar. I will now turn things over to our speakers to get us started.
Thanks, Sydney. Appreciate it. And thank you for having us in this three-part webinar series. So in the spirit of artificial intelligence, I thought I would do my introduction for NIM via a nice video that we created. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Baby Jeff.
I want to introduce to you a friend of mine. His company teaches babies like me to swim so they don't get in trouble around water. He owned 7 swim schools in Michigan before opening 7 more in Jacksonville, Florida. He started a new franchise recently called Fantastic. Super cool name, I know. My friend's name is Nimrod Shapira, but I'm going to call him Nim because, well, it's just easier to say. Nim lives in Florida and in Israel and is about to have his first baby. Clearly, he should name that baby Jeff because that's a super cooler name. But I digress. Today, I'm going to interview Nim. He's going to talk about some of the learnings that he's had over his different companies and how his approach to building a multi-location and franchise business has changed over the years based on those learnings. We're going to spend the first 10 to maybe 15 minutes telling his story because I think it's one that you will truly find special. So let's get started.
So this is what old people do with AI. They don't use it for anything productive. They just make funny videos or not so funny videos. Anyways, let me introduce myself. My name is Jeff Leach. So I've been in the franchise business for over 20 years. Actually, having owned a franchise for a little over 5 years in Old Minuteman Press location. So basically, this topic resonates to me about the learnings of being a startup in the franchise world. I've made a lot of mistakes. And then I become a vendor. So I got to see it from the other side as well, and hopefully bring a little bit of a unique perspective of being both sides of the fence there. So before we start, I do want to introduce Dakota. It will be in the chat. Loretta will be in the chat. So if you have questions, please go ahead and add them there. They will be answering those questions. And if it makes sense, they'll stop and ask Nim a question if you have something important to ask Nim. So that's that. Let's get going. So with Nim, so many times successful business people, and you see it in sports, right? When we're watching the Olympics, there's always a great story, a great challenge that the athlete had to go through to get to where they are. And we see that in business too. Some type of major challenge that they overcame to become who they were. And Nim, for you, that challenge really was when you were about 7 years old. Pretty interesting story. Maybe tell us a little bit about what happened when you were 7 and how it led you to where you are.
Yes, absolutely. First, I'll start with I think I had many more challenges than just the one I had when I was 7 years old, but as any business owner. But the first real challenge or crisis that I had was when I was 7 years old. I drowned in a birthday party with my family around, with a bunch of family friends around, and The funny thing is many drowning, or sometimes maybe most drowning, happen next to people when you have people around you. So I was in the backyard of my grandparents' house and I drowned, and some people maybe even assumed that I was playing at the bottom of the pool, right? But my uncle knew better. He knew that I don't know to swim, jumped in, saved me. And that was something that I kind of carried the rest of my life. For many, many, many years, I kept waking up feeling that I'm drowning in water. But at least I was saved by my uncle, knowing that I didn't know to swim at that point.
So you're at the bottom of the pool, your uncle saves you. What's next? Obviously, you got to learn how to swim. What happens after?
The funny thing with that is that my neighbor to my parents was a swim instructor. And
Yeah.
so literally like the next day or the next few days, my parents put me into swim lessons. They didn't want that to be a shock on me. And I started learning to swim. I did not become a competitive swimmer at that point. I was 7 years old. I was actually playing basketball. It was only few years later, around age 11, 12, that I discovered competitive swimming and I fell in love with the actual sport of swimming.
That's great. So you start swimming competitive. You moved around a lot. So you took that seriously. Your parents invested in you a little, and I believe they moved you, didn't they?
Yeah, so around age 11, I started competitive swimming. At age 12, I already became an Israel champion for my age group. And I also held a British passport. My mom is British. And I remember one day just driving from practice down from Jerusalem with my dad and telling him, hey, I watched on YouTube the best swimmers in the world are in England. I want to go and swim in England, right? I was a 12-year-old dreaming big, wanting to go somewhere and discover the sport of swimming. And that's kind of how I was my entire life, even after swimming. And I always looked for the best platform and the best system for me to be part of. But back then at age 12, my dad heard me. And a month later or 2 months later, I was lucky enough to have an amazing dad and still have an amazing dad that always supported me. And 2 months later, I was living in England and swimming in the best swim team in England in their national center of sports in Bath University. So as a 12-year-old, I joined the system of a college team and the national team of England for the next 2 years of my swimming career. And I have to give credit without my dad supporting and sacrificing. Obviously, he had to leave his job, had to move country, all of that. I definitely would not have achieved half of what I've achieved in my career.
So after that, I believe it was high school, where I live, and you live part-time in Jacksonville, is the #1 high school swim school. If I remember correctly, they would be a top 10 country in the Olympics if they competed as a high school in the Olympics. So you came here to the Bowl School in Jacksonville, and that's really where it took off, correct?
Correct. So right after England, again, I had a discussion maybe 2 years later with my dad and one of my mentors, and I said, "Hey, I'm the best swimmer in my event in England. What's next? What system, what team, what country can we go and train next to the best in the world?" And my dad, and especially my mentor at the time, told me, if you ever want to be close to the best in the world, you have to go to the US. You have to be part of the US high school system and then the US college NCAA system. And at that point, I was probably about 14, 15 years old, and we started looking for what's the best programs in the US. And I was lucky, I was very lucky, very fortunate, to swim fast, but also to have the ball school letting me join in their team. And I pretty much I swam junior and senior year at balls. I got to the US at age 15-ish. And at that point, I was living by myself. I stayed on campus at the dorms at Balls. And I swam junior, senior year, and that's where I made my first Olympic Games as a senior at the Balls school. And again, it's all about finding the best system and the best people around you. If it's athletes that you want to be around, if it's coaches, if it's mentors, or systems like the ball system. I'm in touch with the ball school until today. And even after swimming, they helped me with my business career. So I always looked for those networks and what can get me to the next stage. And I was very fortunate in joining the ball school. So my first Olympic was in 2008 in Beijing as a senior. And then after that, it was okay, I graduated high school. What do I do next? And that came the decision of what's my best event. At that point, you swim at Olympics, or you prepare into the Olympic Games. And my best event was 100 and 200 freestyle. And no doubt, Arizona University in Tucson was the best team in the world for my event. I mean, the Olympic medalists that came from Arizona in the 200 freestyle, world champions, relay champions. That was the best program in the world for my event. And that was the decision factor for me. So I joined the University of Arizona in Tucson in 2008. And that's why I continued my next 4 years and also swam the 2012 Olympics, which Arizona got me there.
I mean, just the gravity of that, the fact that a 7-year-old drowning victim
Yeah.
learns how to swim fast, and ends up going to 2 Olympics is just, I mean, it's movie material. It's fascinating. And I love telling that story. So
Yeah.
you graduate University of Arizona, and I know there was a story there about, what do you do next? I'm sure you had tons of money in your pocket, right? You were real wealthy from your career in swimming.
Yeah.
So you were going to go do something. Tell me a little bit about what happened next.
So actually not. Back then in NCAA, obviously you couldn't make money as an athlete, and also as an Olympic swimmer, you didn't make money. And this was the passion part of my life, right? I swam because I enjoyed it. I love the sport, and I felt I can always get better. And you're right on point. When I graduated in 2013, that was right after the 2012 Olympics. And what most people don't know, that after the Olympic Games, which happen every 4 years, so you kind of building yourself up every 4 years. After you swim at the Olympic Games or you race at the Olympic Games, you have 4 years pinnacle, and then you crash, because the entire purpose that you had for the past 4 years was, I'm going to make the Olympic Games, or I'm going to be the best I can at the Olympic Games, whatever your goal is. And once you finish, literally the next day, a bunch of athletes even get sick because they crash. They're like, okay, what do I do? What do I wake up to? What is going to feel my purpose after swimming or racing at the Olympic Games? And so for me, that was 2013 in Arizona. I was a senior after the Olympic Games, and it was a very tough year for me because I'm a senior, I'm kind of a leader on the team, and we had a relay. Like I was part of a relay that we ended up winning national championships in NCAA. So I had some kind of motivation to swim on that relay, but people that knew me saw that, like knew and saw that I'm kind of tapped out. It was very tough for me to go to the pool. So that 2013 was a very tough year. And as I'm going through it, I'm seeing other people that swam with me at the Olympics and are retiring from the sport. And they become out of shape very quick. They become hairy very quick, because in the sport of swimming, chlorine burns all of your hairs. So once you're done with swimming, all of a sudden you're a different human being. And so I saw that, and I saw that besides becoming out of shape, also people are losing purpose, because your purpose was so high driven of, I'm going to be the best I can be. I'm going to take care of my body. I'm training 2 or 3 times a day for 4 years you have all these goals, and the system holds you so tight together that when all of this is gone, you are lost. And I was scared. Like, I was scared that when 2013 will end up, I will become like the people I'm watching from this very high level athletes. And I saw that, and I wanted to build my plan. So for me, the plan, and I started just sitting in my room thinking, what's after swimming? What's my next chapter? And for me, that was business. It was, how do I stay in the US? How do I fulfill the American dream? I grew up on the American dream. I saw it. I lived in the US, and I didn't want to leave. I wanted to live the American dream, and that's where I started penetrating the idea of how I'm staying in the US.
So was it your coach's wife, I think, had a business that you saw, and I love your analogy there, but I'll let you tell the story.
Correct. So as I was looking through all of my options, right? You don't have a million options, but you have some options. Some of the natural options for me were to stay in the sport of business, in the sport of swimming. And for me, it's, how do I build a career for myself in the sport of swimming? Do I become a coach, or what do I do? And I didn't want to become a coach. And one of the days on deck, I heard my coach talking about his wife owning a swim school. And I asked if I can go and see it and see what a swim school is, right? I've never seen. My learning to swim was my neighbor throwing me into the pool. And I remember walking into her facility, and I remember falling in love with everything I saw from the moment I stepped through the doors. And I told you before, Jeff, that for me it was like almost the same feeling as when I fell in love with my wife, right? It's like you have this aha moment that you see something, you see an opportunity, and you see something that you want to do for maybe the rest of your life. So I remember seeing the numbers, right? As a business, I'm seeing a bunch of kids in the pool. I see 5 instructors in the pool, and I see my mentor at the time, or my friend, Carrie Demont. She's the wife of Rick Demont. And I looked at her and I said, Carrie, why do you have only one of these? Like, you have these 5 or 6 instructors in the water. Why don't you have 50 or 100 instructors? Like, I right away, I'm running 100 miles an hour. And she told me, listen, I was a teacher, and I was comfortable, and now I'm doing this, and I'm making much more money, and I'm happy. I'm really happy where I'm at. And that was interesting and cool for me. But at the same time, I wanted to do what Carrie does, 10x. I'm like, in my head, I love Carrie, and she's been an amazing mentor to me, and I owe her a lot as well. But for me, from day one, is, how do I do 10x that? How do I scale that concept? And on the way home, already driving, I remember I had a beat up old Mazda car, and I was already thinking, how do I build my 10 facilities? How do I do it? Where do I start? The problem is, I only had about $500 in my bank account. I didn't have visa to stay in the US, and I was about to move from, Arizona to stay with my girlfriend in Michigan. So that was my starting point, and it was a very tough starting point, but I found a way to start.
But it's all great stories come
Yeah.
from those type of challenges, and I love that. Okay, so let's jump into some of these learnings. So you moved to Michigan at this point, and you're like, I got to start a business, but not only do I have to start a business, I have to start a business that makes money quickly, because you have none. I think you said $492 or something was like
82.
what for $82 was what you had in your pocket,
Yeah.
and no visa. So you move up there. I know one of your philosophies is never waste a good mistake. I love your philosophy on that, and you made some mistakes along the way, but tell me a little bit about that philosophy. I know you like to compare it to sports, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen as you tell your
Yeah,
story.
so definitely, first of all, I'll touch on the point of where I started. I really did start with $482 in my bank account. I have it framed in my office, so I never forget where I came from, and what I had to do to get to where I'm at. So I always appreciate the journey and the process. But going through that, obviously, I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have family in the US to support me with my ambition and my ideas. I had to go to the first day of business and figure out how do I make money because I have to pay bills and I have to eat, right? And so for me, it was like, how do I start very small and step by step, just growing and scaling it as fast as I can? And so it started from renting one swim lane in a pool and giving lessons. And then it turned to me renting the entire pool and bringing few instructors. And then that turned to renting 7 aquatic facilities in Michigan, right? So that's how it started, and it scaled very quick within 3 or 4 years. And I made a bunch of mistakes. I mean, every single day that I went to my business and my work, it was okay, what kind of mistakes I'm going to make today? Because yes, I have great mentors, and back to Carrie DeMond, she was incredible. But at the end of the day, when you're building a business from scratch, and if you don't have a full playbook, even if you have a full playbook, you're going to make mistakes. And in the first year, it was a very hard transition for me, like to go through all of that. But then I realized that the more mistakes I'm making, if I just don't repeat them, I'm progressing, right? So like I don't waste a mistake. I think every mistake it's good as long as we don't make it 2 or 3 times. And that's something that I learned over the last few years to really mentor my staff and the people that work with me or around me, that we have to make mistakes. I'm the type of person that I make mistakes. I'm building a swim academy right now, and we're still making mistakes, right? Nothing is perfect. And if you know that when you start and you're able to handle that, you're going to be able to handle progress, in my opinion, in a much quicker pace.
Yeah, and I think getting the learnings from those mistakes. There was an analogy I talked to you about a while ago, and you had said, look, you would ask this champion swimmer at the end of a race, he would touch the wall, he would win the race, and you would say, what'd you do after, right? And he'd say, well,
Yeah.
the champagne, we'd celebrate, right? And that
Yeah.
was that. And then you asked him, hey, 4 weeks ago, you came in second. What'd you do after you came in second? I went back, I analyzed every second of that race, every stroke, every turn. And then with my coach, we fixed it. And it
Yeah.
was like an aha moment for you, like, no, you have to do that even in victory, learn from the good and the bad, but especially the bad.
Yeah, you remember this story perfectly, and that guy is an Olympic gold medalist. And the fact that that few months ago, whatever, the race was not perfect and there were all those mistakes, in my opinion, okay, my humble opinion, that's what got him for a few months later to win the Olympic gold medal, right? And I don't think that sometimes people see that or appreciate that. I definitely do appreciate these days, when we make these mistakes, I know that if we don't repeat them, we're gonna win eventually. When it's a matter of time, but as long as we're going to go out there and we're gonna try and we're gonna try and we're gonna fail and we're going to fail, we're going to progress, in my opinion. And you have to fail in order to reach a success point, and you have to appreciate the journey, in my opinion.
I love it. So the next one is kind of interesting. It's your philosophy on being lazy and lazy in a different way. So in your lesson is laziness can be a good thing. So tell me a little bit about your philosophy there.
So when I tell that to people, even my staff, sometimes people get kind of a shock face. And it's not lazy in the matter of just sit and drink pina coladas. It's lazy for the point of, I don't want you to do the same thing over and over and over. If it's repetitive or if it's something that we know that it's working, let's find a way, let's find a system, let's find the vendor that we can trust. We can find the right people, the right systems. Once we build trust with that, it's rinse and repeat. I don't want to ever talk about it again. I don't want to think about it, because at the pace that I'm moving or the pace that we are doing things when you're building a business, you have to make some very critical decisions almost every day. If I need to, right, in some of our facilities, we give lollipops, or we sell goggles, or we sell swim caps. If me or one of my management team members need to think about lollipops or need to think about swim goggles 5 years after we started the business, then that means that we're making those small decisions over and over and over instead of thinking about the next big thing that we're going after. So for me, it's like find the right people, find the right vendors, build systems, build trust in those systems, and find ways to just rinse and repeat without ever thinking about it. And that, if you can be on my team or you can be around me and you're helping us be lazy on those decisions, you just it's pretty much automation, right? That's everything we talk about lately with automation and AI. And I think that's laziness, but that's good laziness.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the analogies you used. I know we've talked about using the Vendasta platform in the past and how you made that decision and then you just moved on and you don't want to talk about having to look for 10 other systems because, it does what you want it to do. It's not core to your business, right? It's not about the
Yeah.
kids teaching lessons or what you really focus on. It's a decision that you made and you're not going to go interview 20 more marketing platforms or 20 more lollipop vendors. You
Yeah.
move on. So I
My,
love the
my,
philosophy there.
I have to touch on that because my grandma was one of my best mentors, right? And one of the things that she always told me, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And she ran her own business, a restaurant, and was very successful back in the day. But if it's not broken, don't fix it. And if we find a vendor right in your place in Vendesta, once we have a system and a solution that works, I don't want to ever, like, I want to just go and implement it. If it's broken, then Jeff and I, we're going to have a talk and we're going to figure out, okay, it's broken, what do we do? And at that point, we might look. But if not, I mean, you're looking for simple solutions. I'm not looking for multi-million dollar solutions, that are very complex. And we have made those mistakes before. I'm looking for the simple, very simple solutions and systems that do it yourself, very automated, and that's the solution that you brought to us, and we're pretty good friends since we met about that.
People buy from people.
Yes.
I love it. So that's a great segue to another philosophy I know you have, which is time is your most valuable asset. And so I know this goes into hiring and the type of people you're hiring, and you made mistakes there too, right? On who you hired. So maybe talk a little bit about that and your life lesson about time.
First of all, on a personal level, I think time is the most valuable thing we ever have, right? I'm sure a bunch of people on this Zoom call have seen the analogy of, somebody, I'll give you, Jeff, $10 million, but if that means, you take it and I shoot you and you're dead the next day, nobody's going to touch that $10 million, right? That means that every single day in your life, in my opinion, is worth more than $10 million. So time is the most important thing in our life, and that goes to business. And I think to finding something that you're passionate about and you're good doing, but you have to know how to use your time. You have to know how to bring the right people around you in the right teams, the right vendors, again, right systems. And I made a bunch of mistakes. My first 4 or 5 years of building my business, I did not know what I'm doing. I was 22, 23-year old, and I was hiring people 15, and I was hiring people that were 50 years old. And I was expecting too much. I was expecting, my first employee, right? I paid them money to work for me, and I was expecting them to do exactly as I'm doing and duplicate me, right? That's the idea. It's you scaling yourself and you're going to duplicate yourself. And I learned probably in the last 4 or 5 years down in Florida when I opened Aquafin, I learned that that's so unrealistic. Like I cannot expect from my employees, of my vendors, to think the same as me or to operate the same as me. I chose to be a business owner. I chose to want to scale and grow very fast, my employees come in and, my full-time employees will come and do 40 hours. I'll have 100-hour weeks. My employees will do 40 hours and they have other priorities. They have their girlfriends, they have their spouse, they have their family, they want to work out, they have their personal goals, their personal dreams. And when I learned to look from the other perspective of the employee benefit, I learned that my first 4 or 5 years in business, I never thought about it in the right way. And I started catering and changing in Florida. Really, that's when that change with me started. Of if you want to bring the right people to your business, you have to first be the right business for your people. Like I had to completely switch that. Money is not the only thing or the only reason people work for you. And I really had to change my culture, my thinking, how I go about the business. And it took me probably a good year to change. We have to be the right business for people. We have to make sure we do for our staff as much as we can, and we actually serve them instead of them serving us. And at that point, a year later, I started seeing like we're actually attracting really good people and people that want to stay with us. And that was a huge lesson. I'm still going through that because that's a very interesting journey. I still feel like I'm a very personal and emotional person, right? That's what I think drives me, being passionate and working 17 or 18 hours a day because I love what I do. So I still feel like I'm being stabbed in my heart if somebody leaves me after, few years. It feels like a breakup to me. And that's something that I'm learning to handle better. And it's not because I'm mad. It's because I'm sad. I keep asking myself, and my wife is my partner these days, and I tell her, could we have done something better? Could we have done something better for that employee, or could we have done something better for the company? What can we do? Because I'm almost taking this is our fault, instead of pointing the finger of the employee and saying they betrayed us. And that's very tough to sometimes sleep on, for sure. But that's part of the journey. That's part of making those mistakes.
And I love it. So it's being customer obsessed, but it's being employee obsessed as well. And I had a conversation with you about there are folks that are career employees and there are folks that are jobs. And frankly, you need both of those. You need the people who are 9 to 5 and 501. They go home and live their lives and have a family, and that's okay. And I think as there's a lot of prospective franchisees here and small franchisors, and understanding that you need to be employee obsessed is a great point. It's a good segue too into another mistake that you made is hiring really expensive, what we'll call them Wall Street employees, right? And your analogy there of giant engines sink small boats. So I loved your points on this. So maybe a little bit about kind of those
So
mistakes, what it did.
that was my try to solve the previous problem we talk about, or the mistake, right? People, didn't stay. Some employees, we saw the turnover, people just leave, and I felt betrayed. So the first solution, instead of solving ourselves and building us as being the right business, we said, we're just gonna buy them out. We're gonna pay and find the best HR director, the best marketing director, the best management team. We're just going to find them, those people, Wall Street people, as you said it, and pay a lot of money. And they're going to come from been there, done that, very big companies. And and I woke up a year into it, or maybe even less, yeah, about a year into it. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? The business was doing good, and we're going to buy this and like bring very good people in. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting with one of my mentors, and I remember we were sitting at Starbucks. This is not a commercial for Starbucks or anything, but like we were sitting at Starbucks, and I was telling him, and before I even finished my first sentence, and this mentor of mine, very dear friend, have built a multi-billion-dollar company and an inspiration as a person. And he told me, Nim, hold on a second. You know what's your biggest advantage? And I said, what? And he said, you are a speedboat. Like I literally have seen you walk in, seeing a building that you think can be a swim school and buying it on a handshake. Like you can make decisions on the fly. You fly so fast. You scale your business so fast by yourself all these years. And guess what you have done? If you take an engine of an airplane 797 and you put it on a speedboat, will your speedboat go faster? And I looked at him and I just said, it's going to drown. And he said, that's exactly what you're doing to your business. You took this massive engine and you put it on the speedboat, and instead of going faster, you just created a system that you are drowning and you're going slower. And that was a huge lesson. And that was a huge lesson that you don't need, big complicated system or big complicated titles. Titles are beautiful, but some of my best employees or my best vendors or my best systems, even Vendasta, again, have been simple solutions. Have been stuff that allowed us to keep our DNA of moving quick. Have allowed us to keep things simple and solve our problems. So that's one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned. And definitely in the journey and what I'm building now with Fantastic Swim Academy, we are not going to ever change the DNA and the culture. And you'll see, we'll build a very large business without taking an engine of a 797. We're going to stay a speedboat. That's our advantage.
I love that. So the next one we kind of already talked about, serve your employees. But it really goes to the culture that you've created where people want to work for you now. And I love that. And little known fact, I have a daughter with Down syndrome who's 22, who's worked at one of NIM's swim schools now for 3 years. I love that you hire people with special needs and make them feel as they're part of the community, which they are. So I can personally attest to this particular bullet that you really do create a culture where people want to work. And I love that. So the last lesson before we kind of summarize it and get second to last lesson before we summarize, is you were an early adopter of AI. And I know you talked a little bit about how being lazy really can be a good thing. AI, and lazy might not be the right word, but AI helps you become more efficient in some areas, so you can have your employees focus on the core business. But talk a little bit about your thinking behind AI, maybe a little bit about what you're doing there and how new franchisors could benefit.
So I was introduced to AI the first time at IFA, and that's the first time you and I met, Jeff, actually.
Years ago.
And it was years ago. It was the first time they talked about ChatGPT and all of that, and years, I'm talking maybe 5, I don't know, years ago. And I remember it was the last day of the convention. It was one of the last lectures. Everyone in there were hanged over with red eyes. I was probably the only person that was paying attention. And as again, I walked in, and from the first slide, it's like the first day that I walked into Carry the Mont Swim School, is I fell in love. Like I saw that for me and for stuff that I'll do and many other businesses, this is the future. Because if you can automate things, if you can have systems that are, solving problems by themselves, it's not meaning that, in my opinion, that I'm going to, fire my entire team. I'm in service industry. I need my team, but my team will be able to handle bigger tasks, right? Instead of ordering lollipops or goggles like we talked before, I'll have systems that are fully automated. And these days, like that's one of the reasons Jeff and I we became good friends, is because I saw that, and we started talking about all of that. And with Vendasta, the solutions that you guys are giving us are incredible. I mean, we're working right now even on the franchising papers and getting all the documents on our own websites. And we're going to have AI agent being able to answer every question you have. So instead of having somebody sitting and just waiting for a franchisee to call us and ask a question, and or if a franchisee is calling at 1 a.m. in the morning, right? I'm a business owner. Sometimes I work till 1 or 2 in the morning. Instead of waiting and to the next day, they can go on a chat and ask our AI, and it will pull the right information from our 400 plus operation manual document. So I think that's laziness, again, going back to that point, but in a good way. It's allowing us to do more, be more creative, do bigger things, and focus on the bigger stuff, where we can have a chat, answer, hey, what type of goggles are we allowed to sell and what's the price of it? I can have an AI chat that Vendesto have provided us to answer that question even at 2 in the morning. It's 24/7 solution. So I think that's just the future of being able to service people.
Yeah, I love it. And you really are putting your money where your mouth is. You're doing so much. And I know you're gonna have that AI receptionist that answers phone calls here any day now too. So that's really cool. We were working on that yesterday for you. The last one here, time to money is critical. So for you, even going back to when you went to Michigan with $482 in your pocket, it was almost out of necessity that you got to revenue quickly. And one of the things I admire about all of your businesses, they're pretty much profitable on day one. And that's not
I cannot promise that and talk about that.
I know. I said it, not you. It's like the commercial that says you can't say you're the best.
Yeah.
But you're incredible at that. And you've recognized that you've got to get these business owners to profitability very, very quickly, because you had to get to profitability very, very quickly. And one of those learnings. So maybe a little bit for the franchisors out there, how did you do that? What tactics are you using? I know your wife is unbelievable at social media, but how do you get there? How did you come to that?
So first of all, it connects to everything we talked about in this interview. My DNA and the business culture that we are building is something that I realize it what got me to success on my previous venture. And it's not something that we will ever want to change, which means time to money is critical. It's a nice way of saying it, but I'm a survivor. Like, I'm literally a survivor. I have a survivor mentality of I had $480, $82. I had no visa, and I wanted to stay in the US and discover the American dream. You have to, how do I make it happen? So, like, when you're pushed into that corner, you are thinking 24/7. You're working from 8 in the morning till 7:59 in the morning the next day, like literally. So that's
You were sleeping there, if I remember correctly.
yes, I had a very long period of times that I was sleeping in my office because it didn't even make sense to go home or so. But the point is, being in that corner makes you very creative, and you solve problems in your sleep. And I'm sure many business owners and entrepreneurs have that. But for me, it's like we always went to directly to our members. Directly, we don't call them customers, we call them members, but we went to them. And most of the members that come to buy swim lessons are moms. So instead of us trying to figure out how do we market to them, I probably talked to every mom of our first 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 families. And I talked with them, and even face to face in person. And I'm like, why did you look for swim lessons? How did you look for swim lessons? Why did you choose us? Why did you call us? And we literally had all these surveys, all this knowledge that I've acquired. And based on that, we build all of our marketing. So instead of inventing and trying to think how to sell, we went straight to our members and we asked them, how do you buy? What do you look for? And based on that, we build all of our marketing. And like you said, my wife is a superstar on social media. And the part that she brings to the DNA is she doesn't care how many the systems and automation and AI and everything, all this nice stuff that we're bringing. She never wants to disconnect that from real reality and real people. So she in each one of our locations, we are taking real picture of real members and we posting them and we sharing them. The content can be AI created, the system, the posting, the tracking, all of that management. But if we posted, a fake picture or the same picture, let's say when we have 100 locations, why will a mom in Texas want to share a post by the swim school if it's not her child? But if I post a picture in Texas of a swimmer from that Texas location, that family of that swimmer will most likely want to share the post. So that's where we connecting the reality and the real people and the real members to all the AI and automation that we do. And all of that, in my opinion, came from the first few years of business. I had to be a survivor and I had to really figure out how we bring money and we create cash flow. And you can't make too many mistakes when you're in that corner.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, AI is fantastic for the mundane, repeatable tasks and
Correct.
taking them off. But ultimately, you want to connect with people.
Yes.
And I get a social media post from you guys almost every day of a child taking the first, strokes in their life or getting that ribbon moving up from level 1 to level 2, and how excited they are. And that's what tugs at me. It's not an AI generated post. It's no,
Yeah.
that's my neighbor's kid who just got that ribbon
Yes.
in that neighborhood. And I think that's really important, that we don't ever lose that human connection. So I love it. This has been wonderful. So I know you had about 5 takeaways. If you were to kind of summarize, some of your learnings, and why don't we go through one by one, kind of each of those? I think the first one was on passion. Um, and I always say you got to be passionate about your business, and you're always like, yeah, you got to be passionate about your business, but it better be a business that can make money. So
Yes. So that's easy for me to say. And some people look at me as like, oh, you were an Olympic swimmer. Of course, you own a swim school. But I want to break this for everyone. If there was no business side in it and there was no money in it, I would have never got into this business. I have to pay my bills. I want to make impact and I want to impact people and members. But even the first few years of my business, I wanted to build my own swim school or swim academy. And when I went to the banks were like, the first impression is like, oh, this Olympian. And I was so passionate. And then I realized I need to tell them, hey guys, this is not about my passion with swimming. There is a real business here, a real business model. This is how we're doing it, and we want to scale it. So passion is really good, but it's not paying your bills. And I think a lot of business owners, they get carried on because some very famous people or Steve Jobs or very successful people say follow your passion. Yes, that's a nice statement to have, but you also have to make sure that you have a business behind it and you are able to pay your bills so you don't follow your passion and for the next 4 or 5 years you're wasting your 401k or you all of your life saving just because you wanted to follow your passion.
yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I love the story. And if they ever make a movie, I mean, the fact that you drowned and then were saved, came back from life, to then later in your life save other people and children from drowning, it's a phenomenal story. But if
Yeah,
it wasn't a business, you're
yeah,
probably not doing it. Maybe you start a charity or something on the
yeah,
side, but it's not your core business. And I know that probably may rub a few people the wrong way, but it's reality. If it's not a
yeah.
business that's going to accomplish your goals, then
Listen, by the fact that it's a business, I employed hundreds of people
yeah.
over the years, and we've impacted tens of thousands of families, in the communities that we serve. I think there is only benefit to the fact that we are business driven because we also want to be the best one, right? We want to serve people in the best way so we get paid and we have more members. I think it's a win for the consumer and for the members as well, big time.
I totally agree. So your second one was one step at a time, a marathon, a daily sprint. So explain that a little bit.
I made that mistake before, right? And I compare a lot of my business journey to my athletic journey. I think, and I told you this before, Jeff, I think I'm in the business, in the sport of business, right? This is for me, it's a sport, right? Building swim academies. I don't see it as going to work every day. I really see this is my activity. This is my, sport that I'm doing. And part of that journey in my first year, I tried to skip 100 steps, and then I learned that you fall if you try to do that, and you make some big mistakes. And so I realized, okay, you gotta go and do exactly what you did when you were a swimmer. You take one step at a time. It's a long marathon, right? To train for the Olympics, it's 4 years, but that marathon is full of many sprints and many accomplishments, many failures. But don't try and take 100 steps at a time. That's a mistake that we made for sure.
I love it. Love the analogy. Third one, stay competitive to yourself.
I think that's another mistake that we have made and I have made. I try to too much look what other people do, what my competition does, and I realized that at a certain point you have to build your own culture, your own DNA of your business. And yes, you want to know you want to know what your competitors are doing, and you want to know your industry, but you have to stay competitive to yourself, because that's, in my opinion, the only thing that you will never be able to beat. If you want to chase excellence, you can always be better, right? Michael Phelps, very famous swimmer. Everyone thought after he's done, nobody's ever gonna break his record. Guess what? I don't think there is one world record of Michael Phelps anymore. And I think that's part of chasing excellence. You can always get better, but you have to stay competing with yourself first before you trying to compete with others.
I love it. And you mentioned this, find the right people, be the right business. What do you mean?
I think that's straightforward to what we talked. I mean, you have to be the right business in order to have the right people around you. And that's big. Like if you're not the right business or you don't have the right people, you're not going to be able to go through this marathon.
Yeah, I love that. And the last one, it hits home for me. It's always about the journey, not about the end results, right? And so enjoy that process and celebrate. I know on my team, every Monday we get together and we just talk about the wins. We talk
Yeah.
about the wins. It just keeps, it's human nature. We stay motivated by the win, the daily wins, the weekly wins. So and then learn from mistakes. So I think you've covered that. Anything to add on that one?
I think just learn to enjoy failing, because that's going to be a part of the journey for anyone. And something I struggled with is celebrating the wins, because every time I get a certain win, I already think about the next goal and the next thing I want to do. So either you or somebody very close to you, for me, it's my wife, when we get to a certain win, she's in charge of the celebration. However we do it, however we celebrate with our team and members and even family, she's the one in charge of that. If you cannot stop and celebrate, find somebody that can be your anchor and can smack you and say, hey, we need to have cheers, or we need to recognize someone because this was a big achievement for us. And I think that's big, because otherwise you wake up in 10 years and you're like, I don't remember any of these wins, so you better celebrate them now.
I love it. Well, Nim, I personally want to thank you. I know on behalf of everybody here, thank you. I know you have a child coming in a month or two as well, your first
Yeah.
child. So congrats there.
Thank
And we appreciate you doing this. I hope folks have found value in this and took a few of the points away. Dakota or Sydney, or any questions, or are we good?
Dakota, anything?
Nothing on the question front here. Looks like you answered everything they might have been thinking and then some, gents.
I love it.
Perfect. Yeah. You guys did great. Thank you both so much. Thank you everyone for joining today. Congrats, Nim, on your the newest addition to your family coming very soon. As I mentioned in the beginning, the recording and slide deck will be emailed out shortly. And if you do end up having questions after the fact, you can definitely feel free to reach out to me and I can field them to the Mendasa team or NIM. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks again.
Bye.